After Morning Tea, we are going to focus a little bit more on cyber readiness and preparedness in banking. To set the scene for that, John Macpherson, a partner at Ashurst, who will be taking the session after Morning Tea, sat down with international cyber security expert Asaf Kochan for this interesting discussion to set the scene for our post-Morning Tea chat on cyber readiness. Take it away.
Asaf, we're very lucky to have you with us today to talk all things cyber resilience. Let's get straight into it. Question one. The theme for the conference this year is resilient and ready. But I'd like to start by asking, ready for what? What do we need to be ready for? It seems as though every week in Australia we continue to see more attacks targeting both data and operations of organisations. Can you start by giving us a sense of cyber incident trends globally and what sort of incidents are challenging organisations at the moment?
Yeah, so again, pleasure to be here with you. And just in terms of kind of the fundamental trajectories, so the digital surface is just growing, connectivity is growing, and digital transformation is taking every enterprise to being more digitized. And in this sense, the attack surface is growing in addition. And cyber's here to stay. It's not moving. It's a problem, but it's an issue which really should be seen as part of running the business for every a company. Like you're making revenue, or like you're reading financial reports, you have to be able to take these risk factors and manage it. And I would say that, first of all, my first kind of opening remark would be that every executive should assume breach at some point. It's you can drive a car for years and not be involved in an accident. In cyber, it's different, especially talking to the financial sector and the banking sector. You are on the target list of someone, at least one. You are there on the target list, and you are going to get hit at some point. And assuming this fundamental truth, understanding it, and taking the practice and the ability to take it forward and to do things according to this assumption is crucial. In terms of the trajectories, so I would kind of mark four major cyber kind of threats which were there, but they're still growing, and some are new and some were just getting more and more sophisticated. So I would say the number one issue is identity. Identity is a huge issue. Identity theft, being able to steal credentials or impersonate, or sometimes in very kind of basic ways do social engineering and playing with identities which you trust, but someone took your identity. This is still, I think, probably the first or second trend which is on the grow, and it was there in the past, but it's just getting more and more sophisticated. The second would be identity of processes. So moving to the cloud. Behind the scenes, because of the complication of the cloud environment and the fact you have a lot of third parties and applications, there is a lot of handshakes, digital and logical handshakes going behind the scenes of applications and services which have to connect, and they have to have a system to trust each other. So trusting each other is also I call it identity of process. You have at least two parties. They have to have a handshake in order to exchange some service or data and trust each other. And then again, you have malicious actors who manage to steal this identity of a process. And this is a way of basically getting hold of very valuable assets or penetrating your network. So we'll get back to the cloud. The cloud is a double kind of end sword. It has major advantages when it comes to security and when it comes to digital transformation, but it's a very complex environment. Number three would be supply chain attacks. So most enterprises, specifically in the financial sector, you rely on many providers to provide your services, from Microsoft to Google to AWS to various vendors in this environment, application SaaS. You do not build services within your premise. So, looking backwards on the massive breach of Microsoft, the end of 23 when private keys were stolen, and this is just one example. Last week, Santander, I think 2 weeks ago, this is a financial provider which suffered a massive breach. So basically, the supply chain vector of, you can do everything right. You can really have the best people, but because of a third-party breach, someone will get into your environment, and this is why you shouldn't assume breach. And the supply chain vector is on the grow, just because of the fact that the digital surface is growing too. Last is data breaches and ransomware. So ransomware is in most cases, over 2/3 of ransomware attacks is around handling, stealing data or encrypting data and seeking ransom. In most cases, when someone encrypts your data or disables your access to your data, you should assume that he took the data out before. So in this sense, data breaches and ransomware would be and are a major trend, which is also growing.
So we've got you described a growing digital surface. So our assets keep growing, and then those four key areas: identity theft, digital handshake, and the interconnectedness of systems and process, supply chain attacks, and ransomware attacks. And that's kind of what you see happening globally now. If we stick with the question about ready for what about the future or the near future? Are there a couple of emerging trends with threat actor capabilities or their methods of attack, perhaps using technology or trends that are in the early stages of development that we should be planning for now, or is it hard to see that?
Well, we already see it. The artificial intelligence vector is here, and traditionally, when I would ask people who's attacking your network or who's the malicious actors, in most cases, they would relate to people, to human beings in some part of the world doing it, and that was true. And it is true until these days. I would say substantial amount of data breaches are done by human beings. But we are seeing a very strong growing trend of machines carrying out these attacks, and smart machines which are utilizing fractions of seconds before closing patches and identifying vulnerabilities which were not implied correctly, or detecting misconfigurations in complex environments. So one key major component is the ability of machines to carry out large scale massive breaches. And when you add the AI component, it becomes much nastier, much quicker, much more sophisticated, and its ability to actually learn and to improve its modus operandi, its malicious modus operandi, grows exponentially. So this is a growing factor, and without going the groups and nation states who are using it, I do not want to go into it right now. But there is a connection between areas and state actors which are equipped and well positioned in terms of their AI capabilities and their computational capabilities to their ability to carry out these kinds of attacks. And we're seeing more and more cyber groups doing it because some of these tools are publicly accessible through innocent applications which people tend to use, like the generative AI components, which are fairly accessible to the public.
And so it sounds as though that this is not something organizations can tackle just by themselves. And one of the key focus areas of Australia's national cyber security that was released late last year includes this increasing cooperation between industry and government. And I know you've spoken about that before and the need for governments to accelerate cooperation with industry. Can you give us some examples of where you see this happening already, and what are some of the key lessons that Australia can take away from where government and industry are working really well together to improve cyber resilience?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start by stating that, cyber as being part of our world here to stay is more of a team game and less of a individual kind of player game. So it's not tennis. It's much more like football and in a large scale. And in this sense, their ability to identify threats globally, because most likely what's running in the UK or in Ireland or in the US is also running in Australia. And most likely that the same group actors, both from a kind of cybercrime perspective and from a political agenda, are the ones who are applying these malicious activities throughout the world. So first of all, being able to understand from an intel point of view what's there in the universe, how it's applied, what sectors and verticals it's targeting. This is key, and you do it. These are things that can be done by two elements, or nation states which are cooperating. Cyber and intel agencies, which is crucial among like-minded countries. In the case of Australia, it's the Five Eyes, or by big multi kind of giant corporation like Microsoft, Google. Some of these corporations have in certain senses, I see them as in some aspects stronger than nation states, or at least some nation states. So the ability to build kind of bridges between governments and agencies and these corporations, which are situated in liberal, free countries, enjoy the prosperity of being in capital markets. This is crucial. And this is something one bank or a group of banks, or even, ABA, banking, Australian banking, it cannot do it. It needs the government to do it and reach out. And this is one major issue. The second is basically reaching out. So the idea is to build kind of a system whereby you as an enterprise can reach out to an agency with a question and get a sufficient, competent, professional answer, which is also applicable and practical. You can do something with it. It doesn't leave you in the air. But it's also the ability for them to reach out to you, because in some cases they will get an alert, they will get a vulnerability which is exposed, or it's going to be exposed because they got it from kind of an intel source, and they will reach out to you and help you pre-position yourself to something which you might face.
So we need help, we need close cooperation between industry and government, but as an organization, we also need to be and to become more resilient. Just wondering, what is that word? What does resilience or cyber resilience mean for you, Asaf?
Yeah, so I began with it earlier. Assume breach. This is number one. Assume breach. This is part of your daily. You're going to meet it at some point. Again, I'm just stressing it. You don't have to be petrified, but it's just a fact of life. Every executive who's sitting here and listening to me right now, you are on a target list of someone, at least one. It might be a nation state. It might be a cybercrime group. It might be a combination of the two. You're there on the list, okay? And at some point, someone will try and hit you. And the way it works in most cases is that when looking at the digital surface, these malicious actors and nation states, they're basically looking into your environment, and if they see a very robust environment, which is well designed in terms of infrastructure, modern infrastructure, cyber layers, and real-time identification of threats. In most cases, they will go elsewhere to weaker players. So, I usually give the example of I give an example of a lion chasing a herd of zebras in the Serengeti or in the savannah. So when he's chasing the herd of zebras, you don't necessarily need to be the first zebra who's running away, but you definitely don't want to be in the last kind of end of the herd, because there you're at most risk. And this is key to understand. So in this sense, being resilient is to assume breach and to preposition yourself to breach, And you do it by practicing, and you do it by training your people, and you do it by building leadership. So when you build cyber leadership or cyber professional leadership, you want people who really understand the way malicious actors and threats are evolving. You don't necessarily want people who just know how to fill the forms or report. This is important. There's the bureaucratic side of running it and managing the risk and quantifying the risk. But at the end of the day, for an executive, you want someone near you which can tell you, listen, there was a major breach in Santander. This is what happened there, and this is what we can learn from that. Or there was a big event in Microsoft. Now I'm going to tell you, dear board or dear CEO or CTO or chair. Now I'm going to explain you what happened there. His ability to explain it, to articulate it, and to really understand it is crucial. And the last point I'll touch on is all the continuity components. So most organizations will have a business continuity plan, a BCP, and they will have a disaster recovery plan or strategy, a DR. But in most cases, these are, when you go into, from my experience, when you go into financial institutes and enterprises and you look at these plans, most of them are designed for physical disasters, not for logical disasters. And when you have a logical cyber disaster, in most cases, and some of these environments are active, so you have active updates going kind of every second because you're backing up your information. And when someone is in your network, when you're suffering an attack, your backups suddenly get poisoned too. Okay. And when you have a disaster, the BCP and the DR are not relevant in terms of a logical attack or logical disaster. So in this sense, you have to have, there are ways to deal with it. The good news is there is effective ways to deal with it. You should have two different plans, one for a physical disaster and one for a logical disaster. In most cases, from my experience, the logical disaster or the cyber disaster is much more concrete, and the likelihood of it happening is much higher.
I like that. So we've got four things. We've got assume breach, practice, build the team and the capability, and then plan for logical disasters as well as physical disasters. Yeah. I think that's great. We're just about on time. I know, Asaf, that you like to leave an audience with something that they will take away and really remember in the days and weeks to come. So I'll give you a concluding remark. What's the one thing that you'd like our audience here at the ABA conference to remember and reflect on as they go home later today?
So as I'm talking to an audience of executives and managers and leadership level, the one key point would be that cyber's here to stay, and you are super exposed. And this is a major business risk. It's not some other risk. It's a major business risk. And you have to live with it. It's, from my perspective, it's probably the major risk for continuity, for reputation, for your ability to sustain your customers, to protect their privacy, bringing tier one leaders who know who know what does it mean to deal with these threats, who can articulate it, can explain to you how to do it better, and can run operational teams. Don't save money on that, okay? Because when it will hit you, it will be too late, okay? This is the major takeaway I would like you to go away. And the second, again, in terms of kind of the more macro level, financial sector is also, when you look at the kind of players in the world, and again, I'm not going into deep details here, but some of the threats are just there to, some of the cyber actors are there to generate revenue. So they just want to find a way to generate revenue and to, extort and to get more ransomware and stuff like that. And substantial numbers there, but some are acting because Australia, the UK, the US are part of the Western way of life. Free, liberal democracies, okay, which stand behind an idea. And in this sense, you are there as a symbol of this way of life. And part of the elements of being on this target list is, for some nation states, is hitting financial sector because it's a vulnerable component in the capitalist markets. And you can really kind of go after these financial institutes and push back and retaliate and pass a message. And in this sense, you're also part of the global political game. This is what I'm trying to kind of very briefly to explain. And it puts you in a major, I would say, elevated risk factor.
Asaf, thank you. And thank you very much for sharing your considerable insights and experience with us today. You've given us all a lot to think about, to reflect on, and certainly a lot to discuss in the panel session after this. So thank you very much.